All right, I think we are now recording. This is James Orr, and I'm joined tonight by Jason Bowman. Hello, Jason.
How's it going?
It's going amazing. How are you?
I'm here.
So it's not going amazing for you?
All
right.
Let's just
You and I will
need
to talk about that after the presentation. All right, so tonight we're doing, apparently, negotiating win-win inspections for maximum benefit.
Oh, right.
That is the recording for tonight, and there's actually some pretty good stuff in here about negotiating inspections and things like that. The video will be posted up at learntobерich.com/negotiating-inspections after this class. Although I always wonder why I put up in here the place of the video, because if you're watching the video, then you know where it is. It's like, why do I even bother?
Well, it's because there's other videos up there as well, right?
There are other videos up there. That's true.
So, it's worth mentioning for folks that did you lock everything down again for premium members?
Yep.
Okay, so if you're a premium member, go in there and watch any of the videos that from presentations from before you started your membership. There is a ton of value in starting from the beginning.
Yeah, there's like 40-something videos, I think.
Yeah.
And I need to fix some stuff on the website. I want to make the membership portal thing not automatically direct to a page that's an error page if you haven't paid. I want to actually show some of the stuff that's on there. So anyway, getting back to this, because I think this presentation is a little bit meaty, so I want to make sure that we have enough time. Who are you and where are you from? I think we've only got a few people on tonight because I did not email everybody again. However, the recordings of the videos go up after the fact, which is totally fine. People are able and welcome to come on to the recording when we do it live, but we also post them up for about a week afterward, and they show up on the website at learntoberiich.com/meetup. So who are you, where are you from, and what's your best tip for inspections? It looks like Elijah says he's from Fort Collins. Best tip, show up at the inspection. Yeah, that's actually a good tip.
Yeah.
Showing up at the inspection. So I think we'll see if anyone else wants to join in while I kind of power through here. But you're welcome to type in the chat box and kind of introduce yourself there. So upcoming.
I just want real quick. Did I ever tell you about my first property, my first Nomad property I had under contract inspection?
No. What happened there?
So I was running about 10 minutes late is all. And an inspection takes a couple hours, right? And so I was running 10 minutes late. Didn't think it was a big deal. But I get out to the house, and the inspector has already left.
What?
Yeah.
Like he was done?
He was done and left.
He did an inspection in 10 minutes?
I was only 10 minutes left. 10 minutes late. My realtor was sitting there in a car waiting for me. She knew I was running behind. I pull up, and I'm like, "Where's Ron?" Because I didn't see his truck.
Yeah.
He's like, she says, "Oh, he left." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Come here." And we went over to the neighbor's house, and the neighbor had shown the inspector photos of how badly the property floods when it rains.
And that was enough? He knew you were canceling?
And that was enough. Yeah, we were going to invoke the inspection clause and back out, because if you weren't aware, it rains an awful lot around here, like a lot.
Like where? Where are you from?
Seattle.
It rains in Seattle?
It does. Strange, right?
It's not a high desert.
So, there hadn't been a hard rain in a couple of weeks, but the neighbor had photos of the water just being up to the siding, and there was just this massive river running the 3 blocks or whatever it was down to the beach and running into the Puget Sound.
Did he charge you for a full inspection?
No.
Okay. Well, that's kind of cool. All right, well, that's actually a good little inspection story.
Go to your inspection.
I think we definitely have a slide on that, so we'll pound it home. But yeah, they definitely should go to your inspections. And another thing, don't show up 10 minutes late. That's the other key point there.
Yeah.
That's a good tip, Jason. Thank you for sharing that. So upcoming classes, next week, Tuesday, April 18th, closing real estate deals. So that's going to cover what happens for the day of closing. I do cover a couple things that happen like just before and a couple things that happen just after, but it really is, what kind of paperwork you're expecting to see, how closing typically works, how it gets scheduled, all the stuff that you'll want to know about closing a real estate transaction. That's next week. And then we get into some more of the sexier topics. Some of these topics, they appear kind of dry, although, if you ask some of the people that are on the call now or the people that were watching the recording in the past, they will tell you that they are actually not that dry. They're kind of interesting. But the topic titles are like, who wants to come to how to win, how to do win-win inspection issues or whatever we call this class. Doesn't sound sexy, right? It's not like how to make $1 million in real estate with nothing down.
Right.
So the classes that are coming up, though, they get back into those sexy topics like Catch Up Nomad Overview, which is about how to catch up on retirement and fund your retirement using the Nomad model. Analyzing a Deal Brian spreadsheet. People really like that class because it's about deal analysis. And then CapEx, a Silent Killer, which is about capital expenses and how they can crush your deals. And then Full Schedule. That's a really good class. I mean, that's probably the most exciting class of the year. The Full Schedule class. You familiar with that class, Jason?
No, I haven't been through that one. I'm really looking forward to it, though.
All right, that's the schedule for the rest of the year. You guys can go look at that online. So, Jason, what is Nomad? I missed you last week because we did this slide and you were not around.
Sorry, man. So, Nomad is a real estate investing model wherein I like to call it, you just do what you already do. You buy a house and you move in. And then you just do the same thing 1 year later and turn the previous one into a rental.
Yeah.
And you just keep that until you have as many properties as you want.
So why do we have to move in? Why aren't we just buying them and not moving in?
Well, we are buying these properties using owner-occupant financing, which requires that you become an owner-occupant, as in occupy.
Can't we just say we're doing owner-occupant financing, wink, wink, and not move in?
You could, but you may end up with Bernie Madoff as a roommate.
All right.
Actually, I think he's dead, but you get the point.
Bernie Madoff is dead?
I think he died in prison.
Really? Like suicide died in prison or killed?
He had a heart attack or something.
Oh, wow.
He wasn't exactly a spring chicken.
Yeah. All right. So basically the model, again, is buy a home as owner-occupant. We move into the property, live there for a year, and then we buy a new home, convert the previous one to rental, and we repeat until you have the number of rental properties that you want to have. One of the big benefits of doing that is lower down payments, slightly better interest rates. The downside, of course, is you have to move in and live there for a year. But it's worth it, and for most cases, it's worth it to make that trade. You can buy 10 rental properties with the amount of money you would need for 2.5 down payments if you were not doing it this way, if you think about it that way. So a lot better from a down payment standpoint. All right, so let's jump right into the meat of this presentation. Negotiating win-win inspections for maximum benefit. Here's the inspection flow chart, and I'm going to kind of go into detail tonight, but I do want to work through this little flow chart that I made that shows you, at least in Colorado, how the inspection works. And so it's kind of just works from left to right. I'll kind of cover it with you. So the first step in the inspection flow chart is inspect the property during the showing. So Jason, when you're out there buying a Nomad property for the first time, you are looking at the property and evaluating the condition of the property and seeing things. If you don't like the condition that you see, you're obviously not going to write an offer on the property, but that's the first step in your inspection. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Then after that, you make your offer, you get your offer accepted. After you get your offer accepted, then you inspect the property. This is where your inspector that you hired came in and you paid them money to come out there and inspect the property. Are you required to hire someone to inspect the property?
Nope.
You're not.
You could do it yourself. You're not even required to do an actual inspection.
That's right. So you don't have to do it, but most of the time for clients, at least to my clients, we do recommend you hire a professional to do that. It is not me. I'm not qualified to inspect properties for you. So you want to go hire an inspector, a third party, pay them the, whatever it is, $300, $400, whatever they're charging these days in order to inspect the property. And then once you inspect the property, you have three options. Option number one is you could say, whoa, wait a minute, seller. I don't like something about the property. The inspector found out that there is mold in the attic, so I object. Or you could say, whoa, 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 wait, Mr. Seller. I found out there's mold in the attic, I want to actually terminate the agreement. No matter what you do, you could tell me you're going to go have the mold fixed. I don't care. I no longer want to complete the contract. I'm going to terminate. Okay. Or you could say, whoa, 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 Mr. Seller. There's mold in the attic, but I don't care. I'll take the property as is. Okay. So it's the 3 whoa, whoa, whoa seller options. You can object, you can terminate, or you can accept as is. I'm going to cover the accept as is and then the terminate ones first because they're a little bit easier and shorter to understand. And then I'm going to go through the objection one. Okay. So the accept as is, you say, hey, I'm totally fine with the condition of the property, whether there's mold in the attic or not. I'm going to accept the property in as is condition. And then we would fill in a form called the inspection resolution, which means you are resolving the inspection on the property. And you would say, I accept the property in as is condition and I'm moving forward with the purchase. Okay. So that's sort of like paper trailing that you're accepting the property.
Right.
Or the other option, remember the whoa, whoa, whoa seller, you could terminate. And if you were going to terminate, you would send over the seller a notice to terminate based on your inspection clause and an earnest money release form, which says the buyer's getting the earnest money back or whatever your agreement is. But in most cases, the buyer's getting the earnest money back and that you absolve each other of any further obligations and liabilities regarding the property. You're saying, I release you. There's no more issues with the property. You're free to go. Okay. So those are the 2 forms, notice to terminate and then an earnest money release. Now, the third option that we talked about is that objection option where you say, whoa, there's mold in the attic. I want you to do something about it. Okay. And when you decide what it is that you're objecting to, you send over what's called an inspection objection notice. And it's a form that we use, Colorado State approved form, that basically says, here are the issues I have with the property. I'm going to show you one later. Then after you give the seller, or the seller's agent really, give the seller's agent the form that says, these are what I'm objecting to, then there's a negotiation that goes on between the buyer and the seller saying, okay, so what are you going to do about it? The seller may say, nothing, pound sand, okay? Seller may say, I'm happy to give you $500 if you'll kind of take the property as is. Or they could say, maybe I'll fix the whole thing and I'll pay for all of it, okay? So there's lots of different options. Negotiations are really wide ranging. But the options are, you either come to a resolution where something the seller offers you or you offer the seller is agreeable to both parties, the buyer and seller, or there's no resolution, meaning that what you proposed to the seller, what the seller proposed to you is unacceptable to either party, okay? So if there is resolution, if you kind of come to an agreement, what we would then fill out is that inspection resolution or an amend extend form, okay? Or you can withdraw the inspection objection notice. You could say, hey, listen, I no longer object. You convinced me this is really healthy mold. It's actually mushrooms that we can eat. So I accept those in the attic now. I don't object anymore. I'm going to withdraw my inspection objection. That's another option you can do. Okay? Kind of a far-fetched example, but that's the idea. And if you don't come to a resolution, so you say, I want you to fix the mold in the attic. They say, no, we had 19 offers on the property. We accepted yours because we thought you were not going to ask for anything. We'll go to offer number 18 if you don't accept. So, decide what you want to do. And then you can decide whether you terminate, in which case you probably want to do a notice to terminate and earnest money release, although technically you don't need to do it. Or you can say, oh, Mr. Seller, I was only joking. I really didn't mean for you to really fix the mold in the attic. I was just seeing if you would do it. And since you won't do it, that's okay. I'm going to continue with the sale. I'm going to withdraw my inspection objection, and I'm going to continue. Okay? Does that sort of make sense, the flow chart of that, Jason?
Yeah, this is a pretty nice little flow chart. I like this.
Yeah, I made that a couple classes ago. So it's kind of a nice little way to understand what the options are visually and how it all works. And we're going to go into a lot more detail on this tonight, but that's the basic working model of what you got going on. All right, so a lot of times I show you this other kind of flow chart of the buying process overview. And I'm asking you tonight, what part of the buying process are we in for the inspection? So the kind of flow chart is, again, the first meeting with me. You tell me, hey, listen, we're interested in buying a house. I say, great, let's get together. We're going to go to my favorite restaurant. You're really going to love it. You're going to enjoy the atmosphere, and the food is amazing, and you're going to love sitting down at my special table. And so we're going to go to Qdoba, and we're going to sit down and talk about the buying process. That's the first meeting. After the first meeting, but before we go on showings, there's a few things I need you to do, like talk to a lender, get a lender letter, those sort of things. That's pre-showings. And then when we go look at properties, that's part of the showings process. And then once you decide, hey, listen, I really like this house, I want to write an offer on it, we write an offer. And then once you get your offer accepted by the seller, then you're in the period between going under contract to closing, what we call contract to close. And then after that, we have the closing itself. That's when you show up on closing day and close. And then after that, there's a whole bunch of things I do for you after closing, which is what I consider post-closing. Okay? So what part of the process, Jason, do you think we are in when we're talking about the inspection? Where does the inspection hit? You have a guess? Did I lose you? All right, I think we lost Jason. So,
we're in the contract to close phase.
Oh, what's that? I'm sorry?
We're in the contract to close phase.
That is true. Anything else? No, that's it.
Okay.
All right. So contract close. So what level of inspecting are we doing prior to going under contract? So when you're out there looking at properties, doing showings, we are looking for obvious and especially large dollar inspection issues, including things like roofs. If you notice that the furnace looks like it's 90 years old and still running barely, that would be something for you to consider. If you notice that the countertops are all burned or got major holes in them or scuffs or things like that, you're looking at things like that. Obvious inspection issues with your initial offer. Now, Jason, what do you think about this? Is it acting in good faith for you to walk through a property during inspection and you start saying, wow, this carpet is really nasty. I would never let my kids roll around on this carpet, which, by the way, is my criteria as to whether or not you need to replace carpet. If you're willing to let your 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids roll around on the carpet, if you would be okay with that, then those carpets are fine. If you're not okay with that, you need to replace the carpets, okay? So if you're looking at the carpet, you're like, oh my gosh, these are nasty. They smell. There's some stuff growing in the corner of one side of the carpet, and there's like holes in the really wear pattern where you walk down the hallway, and there's a really funky stuff. So you notice that when you're walking through the property, you go under contract, and then during the inspection, you come back and you ask the seller to replace the carpets. Is that playing fair?
No.
I don't think so either. And so I don't think it's acting in good faith. If you walked in, saw the condition of the carpets, made your offer based on the condition of the carpets, and then you decided you were going to ask for those during closing. Now, did you go up on the roof during your showing?
Well, I do now.
You go up on your roof during the showing?
I do now.
Okay, you shouldn't do that. So my buyers, you should not be going up on roofs during showings, in my opinion. You should go under contract and then...
I'm kidding, by the way.
What's that?
I'm kidding, by the way.
Okay, good. So you should not go up on the roof during showings, like Jason says. And you should basically, during the inspection, have your inspector go up there and inspect the condition of the roof. And since you did not go up on the roof, it is fair to have issues with the roof. It is also fair to have issues with the furnace that you're not qualified to look at, has issues with other things that you found out about the property that came up on inspection that you did not base your offer on. Now, let's go back to the carpet as an example, because I never really covered this before. But if you go in there and you notice that the carpets are bad and you do want the seller to deal with that, the time to put that in the offer, in my opinion, is when you make your initial offer. You can say, listen, Mr. Seller, I'm willing to give you full price, but I do want you to replace carpets. So as long as you're willing to replace carpets, I will offer you full price on your property, and we're willing to do that. It's not during inspection, though. It's during the initial offer phase. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And one thing I'll say to that, and maybe folks are getting tired of hearing me talk about this, but since I did VA on my first two, and I'll probably do FHA on my next one, high likelihood, the government guarantee MPRs, the minimum property requirements, I think it's important for people to be at least aware of the general content of the MPRs. And when they go in and are making an offer, that they communicate to the seller, look, the VA is most likely going to require that you do this or that. Yeah. I think that it's important to at least communicate that to the seller.
Yeah, and the sophisticated seller's agent should know that, right? The listing agent should know that. But you're right, not all listing agents are sophisticated. There are some new agents out there. So they may not realize that. And so it's probably better to have that discussion ahead of time. All right. So dates are important. We're primarily going to be discussing two dates in the Colorado Real Estate Commission approved contract: the inspection objection deadline, which is your deadline for making an objection to the condition of the property, and then your inspection resolution deadline, which is the date the buyer and the seller have to come to an agreement on the inspection objection issues. So anything you objected to, you have until the resolution deadline to resolve, okay? So what is each one? We're gonna go over that. And what are the buyers typically doing for each? We're gonna cover that. And then what am I doing as your real estate broker for each? Okay, so what are the deadlines? Let's start first, let's go back to the contract to buy and sell and talk about section 10.3, which is your right to inspect. And I'm gonna read you part of the contract just in case you haven't read one before. So section 10.3, inspection. Unless otherwise provided in this contract, the buyer, acting in good faith, oh, that's kind of critical, has the right to have inspections by one or more third parties, personally or both, of the property and inclusions, they consider that the term inspection, at buyer's expense. Okay, so good faith. You can't terminate for other reasons and call it inspection. For example, Jason, let's say you made an offer on a property, and then you just decided, you know, I actually like another property better. I'm going to terminate this one, and I'm going to go buy the other property. I sort of like changed my mind. I want to buy a different property, and so I'm going to move forward with that. So you cannot, act in good faith, terminate and say it's based on inspection. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, most people believe that they can use the inspection clause as a way to just terminate at will. I didn't like the property. There was something about it, the condition of it wasn't good enough for me. Right?
Right.
Now, it is generic enough that it might read that way, but it's not acting in good faith. And I think if a seller really wanted to make us think about it, it's hard to prove, but I think that they could try to make a case that you were not acting in good faith if you just decide to change your mind. Okay?
Now, we actually had a kind of a tangent on this a few weeks ago, I remember, about this. And so let me ask you this. Do you think that it is not acting in good faith if somebody is in the situation you just described, and they're not going to back out because they found a better house, because they realize that that's not the right thing to do? But do you think that it's okay for them to be legitimately a little bit pickier on the inspection? Like,
sure.
maybe if they don't find a better house, if that isn't out there, maybe they don't call out the mold in the attic. Okay? But if they found a better house, they're going to call out the mold. Do you think that doing that is a violation of the good faith clause?
I think it's partially about intent, right? Are you acting in good faith? Is your intention to be fair and play by the rules? Now, if you really have an issue with any of the conditions of the property, it is up to you, according to this kind of section here, to object based on it. And I'm going to go into a lot of detail about what you can object on, like the kind of issues with stuff.
Perfect.
In detail. Yeah. But I think if you really have issues with that, you have a right to object, unless you modify the inspection clause, which I'll talk about in another slide too. Okay? But I think you do have an obligation to act in good faith as a buyer. Okay? So don't terminate for another reason and call it inspection. Don't put it under contract thinking you're going to wholesale it, and when your wholesale buyer falls through, cancel on inspection. Right? Think about it that way.
Yep.
All right, so one or more third parties, kind of reading back through this thing. So you could inspect it yourself. You could hire an inspector to inspect it. If your inspector doesn't do a job that you're satisfactory with, you can hire another inspector to do it. You could hire a third inspector. You could hire a fourth inspector, one or more third parties. So you can hire as many as you want. You could bring in the inspector. The inspector says, hey, listen, I'm not an engineer. Some funky engineering stuff going on here. Maybe you should bring someone in. Excuse me. You can then hire an engineer to come in. Or maybe he says, hey, look, it looks like mold in the attic. Maybe you want to get like an environmental hygienist in there to look at the property. Or maybe you want to get someone in there who specializes in electrical or plumbing, or get your property manager in there to tell you if the property is going to rent okay. Those are conditions of the property that I think are valid for you to get professionals in there to assess the property. Okay?
Absolutely.
So what about your potential new tenants? This kind of comes up less so with nomads because they're usually moving in for a year, but sometimes investors are buying properties. Nomads already bought their one nomad property for the year and they're buying a second property on the outside. Do you think it's okay to use the inspection period and the inspection clause, your ability to get in the property, to bring potential new tenants through?
No, because they're not qualified either.
Yeah, I don't think they're really doing inspections. Okay.
No.
Now, some people could argue, well, if the tenant's not willing to rent the property, that's a condition thing, and I'm willing to cancel based on that. I think it's a stretch. But, if you feel comfortable doing that, I think it's in the gray area of stuff. Now, you might be able to get permission from the seller in the additional provisions when you write your contract to say, hey, listen, I'm willing to make this offer. I'm willing to offer you full price. However, I want the right to be able to market the property for rent before we close, and I have the right to actually show it to tenants before we close. And if it's vacant property, I think a lot of sellers would be okay with that.
Yeah.
As long as you had your real estate agent there. You're not going to be able to do it without an agent being present. Okay? So you might be able to get that in additional provisions. Now, what can you inspect? The property and inclusions. What are inclusions? We will cover that in a few slides. And then at buyer's expense, is the seller paying for the inspection?
No, I am.
Is the real estate agent paying for the inspection?
They do sometimes, but usually no.
Yeah, I think most of the time, no. I have an idea about perhaps offering that as a service, but I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
But there's a possibility that could happen in the future. Okay, I think there's some weird liability for me, and that's one of the reasons why I haven't done it. But it's usually at the buyer's expense that they get to hire their inspectors and come out there and have them do that. Okay.
Do it as a credit at closing against your commission.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Instead of just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that's actually good. Probably should discuss that at a later point. So 10.3, continuing on, what can you inspect? This, again, is coming from the contract to buy and sell real estate. There are 5 items. Item number 1, and there's a quote. If 1, the physical condition of the property, including but not limited to the roof, one of the things we talked about, the walls, structural integrity of the property, whether it's falling down or not, the electrical, copper, the aluminum wiring versus knob tube wiring, those are issues you can object to. Not having ground faults, circuit indicators, GFCI, is that what it is? Yep, GFCI outlet things in the bathrooms, you can object on that. Plumbing could be an issue. The HVAC, the heating and air conditioning kind of component of the house. Other mechanical systems of the property, doors, cabinets, things like that. You can object to any of those things. This is, in my opinion, often what most people think of when they think of inspection. But there are 4 other items. Okay. Item number 2, the physical condition of the inclusions. The inclusions are written out in the contract in section 2.5, and they include, the purchase price includes the following items inclusions, which we'll go over in section 2.5 and 2F, covering inclusions of the contract. Here they are. Inclusions attached. These are other things you can object to now, realize. If attached to the property on the date of this contract, the following items are included unless excluded under exclusions. That's a mouthful. Number 1, lighting, heating, plumbing, ventilating and air conditioning units, TV antennas, inside telephone, networking coaxial cable, wiring, connecting blocks and jacks, plants, any plants that were connected at the time the contract was written, any mirrors, kind of one that throws off some people. They're like, hey, I want to take this mirror with me. And the sellers think they're going to take their mirror with them. If it's attached to the contract, it's included unless it's listed under exclusions. Floor coverings, that's pretty interesting. If you tack down a floor covering to the floor, it's probably included. Intercom systems, built-in kitchen appliances, that's gets some people. Sprinkler systems and controls, built-in vacuum systems, including the accessories, garage door openers, including all remote controls, and if checked, the following are owned by the seller and included. Leased items should be listed under due diligence documents. You can click none. Solar panels, water softener, security systems, satellite systems, including satellite dishes. If any additional items are attached to the property after the date of this contract, such additional items are also included in the purchase price, and you can object to all these things. Okay? So you don't like the mirrors or the plants or the floor coverings, you can object. That is a valid objection according to the contract, interestingly enough. So we can inspect all those as part of the inspection, and we can object to all those with a standard objection. Here are the inclusions not attached, continuing from the contract. Section 2.5.2, inclusions not attached. If on the property, whether attached or not on the date of this contract, the following items are included unless excluded under exclusions. Storm windows, storm doors, window and porch shades, awnings, blinds, screens, window coverings and treatments, curtain rods, drapery rods, fireplace inserts, fireplace screens, fireplace grates, heating stoves, storage sheds, carbon monoxide alarms, smoke/fire detectors, and all keys. So guess what? You can object to all of those things as well as part of your contract inspection.
You know what? I really don't like the fact that all the keys are silver. That is a deal breaker.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you could do that if you were not willing to be acting in good faith, sure. Or your agent would step up and say, what color would you like your keys to be, Jason? If that's really all you're objecting to, I will buy you new keys. Right? I mean, isn't that sort of the thought? Okay. All right, section 2.5.3, personal property. So conveyance. Any personal property must be conveyed at closing by seller free and clear of all taxes except personal property tax for the year of closing. Liens and encumbrances except none. Conveyance of all personal property will be by bill of sale or other applicable legal instruments. It is not really applicable for our discussion on inspection because personal property is not something you can object to. Okay. Other inclusions, the following items, whether fixtures or personal property, are also included in the purchase price. This is where we typically write out any additional inclusions like currently installed electric range oven, dishwasher, refrigerator, clothes washer, clothes dryer, microwave, and you can inspect those and you can object to them as well as the contract is written.
Nice.
Pretty interesting, right?
Yeah.
All right, here's another one. Parking and storage facilities, 2.5.5. Parking and storage facilities, you can either have use of them, ownership of them, and then they describe them, or use of or ownership of the following storage facilities. We can inspect these and we can object to them. So if you don't like the storage shed, that's objectionable. Okay? What can you inspect? This is the third one of the 5. Getting back to this. This quoting from the contract again. Service to the property, including utilities and communication services. So for example, Jason, let's say you work at home and you need high-speed internet in order to do your job. Mm-hmm. If you go under contract and you call up Comcast and you say, Comcast, I would like to have, 1 terabyte speed data transfer on my home or whatever the highest speed craziness they can get their fiber. And they say, hey, we don't have fiber to that. And they're like, what? Wait a minute, you don't have fiber? Really? Well, then I object. I do not want to buy this house because I cannot get fiber speed internet connection to this property. Or maybe you can't get Comcast. Or maybe you can't get telephone service. Or maybe your cell phone service doesn't work. You go in the house, you realize AT&T coverage in your house sucks. So you're not going to go there.
For some of us, that is a legitimate objection.
I agree. I totally agree. But what people don't necessarily realize is they can totally object to these things. This is part of your inspection. If you don't like the cell phone service you get in the house, it is a legitimate objection according to the contract for you to object based on that. It is item number 3, service to the property, including utilities and communication services, systems and components of the property, heating and plumbing. Verify you have the utilities you want, or you can object. High-speed internet, water is becoming an extremely important issue as well. So if you don't like your source of water, where it's coming from, and you just found out about that after the fact and you did some research and you're like, whoa, I don't think insert name of city or water supplier here, I don't think they're doing good planning for their water. I'm no longer interested in buying this property. I object. Okay? Moving on. This is number 4 or 5. Any proposed or existing transportation project, road, street, or highway. So they're proposing that they're going to put in a park next to you, and you're like, I hate kids. I do not like to have any type of traffic going here. I think it's going to cause backups and stuff like that. Or there's a new stadium going in town. Maybe you have some issues with that. You can object based on that, and it doesn't have to be an existing one. It could be proposed. So let's say you're about to buy a house and you're looking over in Quail Hollow, and you happen to go out on a Friday night to look at the property in the backyard, and the road going to right across, basically right by Quail Hollow, you find out that there is parking backed up as people are going into the drive-in movie theater for the night. Maybe you don't like that anymore. Okay. Check with city, county, state, neighborhoods, and other resources if you have concerns about this during inspection period. You can object to this if it's not acceptable to you. And then number 5, and this one's pretty gnarly. Any other activity, odor, or noise, whether on or off the property. For example, barking dog. You could smell the cattle from maybe a neighboring town. Maybe the neighbors are out partying in their hot tub late at night. Whether it's on or off your property and its effect or expected effect on the property. Doesn't even need to have an actual effect. You just say, I think the neighbors are bringing down the value of this property because they're out partying really late on Saturday night. Okay, I'm going to object on that.
Are you ripping on Greeley?
No, I'm just saying these are things you can object to, okay? So its effect or expected effect on the property or its occupants is unsatisfactory. Here's the crazy thing. In buyer's sole subjective discretion, you do not need to prove that it's stinky in the next city. All you need to say is, in my subjective discretion, the next city is stinky. I can smell it from here. I am no longer interested in buying the property. We are terminating on inspection. Then continues on. Buyer may honor before inspection objection deadline. So you have to do this before the inspection objection deadline. You can't wait till 28 days in, unless your inspection objection deadline is 28 days in. It has to be before that deadline. Honor before that deadline. So this is wide-ranging, this kind of whole 1 through 5 clause, wide-ranging and very buyer-friendly. Other activity, odor, or noise, we talked about that. Effect or expected effect on property, buyer's sole subjective discretion. This is like super, super buyer-friendly, which is why a lot of people feel it is sort of like the get-out-of-jail-free card clauses of the contract. There's something I don't like about the property, I could basically object. Well, basically, but not really. I mean, there's definitely limits on what you can object to. There's a wide range of them, but there you go. Okay?
Yeah, and like you said, there's a limit, and there's that good faith element.
Yes.
Like, you know, I'm sure that I don't think that they're still doing it, but I'm sure that when Allegiant Air started operating flights out of the Fort Collins Loveland Airport years and years ago, you know, commercial flights, it increased the jet noise substantially.
I'm sure.
And so it wouldn't surprise me a bit if somebody exercised this clause.
Sure. You know? I think that's totally reasonable. Yeah, I agree. All right, so it has to be on or before the inspection of deadline. Deadlines are important. You can ignore deadlines if you want to lose your earnest money and if it's specific performance to be sued. You know, but otherwise, you should really kind of pay attention to when these deadlines are. They're extremely important. So here are your options on the next slides. Number one, you can terminate. 10.3.1, this is from the Colorado Real Estate Commission approved contract again. Notice to terminate. You can notify seller in writing that this contract is terminated, or, so we're going to cover what the next one is on the next slide, but you basically submit the following. A notice to terminate, which is unilateral, meaning you do not need the seller to sign saying, I accept your notice to terminate. You basically said, I am terminating, here's the reason why I've terminated. Okay? It's unilateral, meaning it only needs your signature as the buyer. Okay? And the earnest money release, which is what you and the seller agree happens to earnest money. That is a bilateral agreement, meaning that both you and the seller must agree how earnest money is handled. It is not automatic that if you terminate based on inspection, that the seller is going to say, oh, yeah, no worries at all. I totally understand. You don't like the smell of the neighboring city. I'm going to let you terminate, and here's all your earnest money back. The seller can, at their option, say, I don't think you're operating in good faith. I think you already knew about the smell. And so I don't think that this was a good faith type of thing, and I am actually going to not agree to release your earnest money. You can sue me to try to release the earnest money. You can seek legal kind of justice or legal, whatever they call it, outside of the contract in a court and try to convince me that that's fair. And I'm not letting you off the hook for other obligations you have in the contract. Okay? Now, does this happen all the time? No. Most of the time, most sellers are like, sure, you know, you had a legitimate reason to object here, and I'm going to release your earnest money, and everything's fine. But they do not have to. And if you're really tight on money, and that's the only earnest money you have, if they don't give it back to you, and you're going to fight over it for the next month or 2 or 3, and you can't buy a new house in that meantime, realize that's a legitimate concern.
Yep.
So be super careful about that. We're going to go over each of those forms in a few slides, but the key takeaway is you don't have to object. You can decide you don't want to buy based on the criteria we've covered only, and the 1 through 5 items, and you could say I'm terminating. So it's not, hey, listen, I don't like the smell. What are you going to do about it? I'll install air fresheners and ionizers all around the house, and they'll deal with the smell. You can just say, I don't care what you're going to try to do. I'm just not buying the house based on the inspection. Okay, you can terminate. And there is no I changed my mind clause. You must legitimately object to something objectionable, acting in good faith. You know, look at the deadlines you have, the things that you can object to, and You need to know, I don't like this, and this is why I'm not buying the property, not I changed my mind and I don't like this property anymore, or I'm going to buy a different property, and so I need to get out of this one so I can move forward. There is not a I changed my mind clause. You need to actually object to something you can legitimately object to in the contract. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so we could either terminate or you can object. This is from the contract again. 10.3.2, inspection objection. You can deliver to the seller a written description of any unsatisfactory physical condition that the buyer requires seller to correct. So I would say to you, Jason, these are the problems I have with the property. What are you going to do about them? Or these are the problems I have with the property. This is what I'd like you to do about them. Okay? You can object to the unsatisfactory physical condition the seller must correct, negotiate whether the seller will do it, or one of the two options, which is what I'd like to do. You can either terminate because you could not reach an agreement by inspection resolution deadline, or you can withdraw your inspection objection notice and proceed to property purchase as is. So here's how it works. And we kind of talked about this during the little chart thing, the flow chart at the very beginning. So Jason, you say, hey, listen, I don't like the mold in the attic. You're the buyer. I don't like the mold in the attic. Seller comes back and says, I'm sorry you don't like the mold in the attic. I'm not going to do anything about it. At that point, you have to decide, are you okay moving forward with the contract, or do you want to terminate the contract? If you want to terminate, the form you send over the inspection objection itself says, if you do not come to an agreement by the inspection resolution deadline, the contract automatically terminates. So if you don't do anything, you don't come to agreement, by default, you terminate. So if you really do want to continue, what you need to do is withdraw your inspection objection before the inspection resolution deadline has passed to say you're going to continue with the contract. Does that make sense? Is there anybody who's on the thing that does not make sense to? Because it's a really critical point. Jason, did you understand that part?
Yep.
Okay, good. So remember, must object on or before inspection objection deadline, or you waive your right to object or terminate based on inspection. Then we'll go over the inspection objection notice in a few slides. Okay. This is good stuff. 10.3.3, you can resolve your objection. 10.3.3 is inspection resolution. If an inspection objection is received by seller on or before the inspection objection deadline, and if the buyer and seller have not agreed in writing to a settlement thereof on or before inspection resolution deadline, this contract will terminate on inspection resolution deadline. So basically it tells you, if you object and you guys don't come to an agreement by the inspection resolution deadline, the contract terminates. Unless the seller receives buyer's written withdrawal of the inspection objection before such termination. So you could wait till 11:58 on the day of your inspection resolution, and you could say, oh, wait, I'm sorry, I was just kidding. I really don't want to terminate. I was just seeing if you would fix it. You're not going to fix it, so I'm going to withdraw my objection, and I'm going to continue moving forward with the contract. Okay? That's how that works.
What's your normal number of days between the inspection objection deadline and the inspection resolution deadline?
About 3.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. So important. You must withdraw your inspection objection notice if you still want to buy the property as is on or before the inspection resolution deadline to avoid terminating the contract automatically. Or buyer and seller can agree in writing to a settlement on or before the inspection resolution deadline. The inspection resolution form is what we use to do that, and we're going to go over that here in a few slides. Okay, so here are the dates and deadline groups. The dates and deadlines we're primarily talking about are that inspection and due diligence ones. Here's what those deadlines look like. There's an inspection objection deadline, an inspection resolution deadline. There's one for insurance. There's 3 for due diligence documents, and then there's one if there's a conditional sale, if you have to sell a property in order to do this one. So we're going to primarily talk about inspection objection deadline next. So what do we often use in the contract? Glad you asked Jason that question. We usually use in the contract for the inspection objection deadline, we give you 10 days to have the property inspected by your inspector and for you to give us a list of the stuff that you need done to the property for you to continue. So what are we as the real estate agent doing for the buyer, for you, during this period? Number one is if you need a list of inspectors, we will provide that for you. I'll say, listen, I've worked with these several inspectors before. Here's the ones I recommend and why. Feel free to pick any of the ones you want there or ones that you know from outside, and you can go ahead and hire them and do that. I'm discussing what, if anything, you'd like to object to. So we'll have a conversation after you've gone out there with the inspector. The inspector says, hey, listen, there's mold in the attic. I say, great, let's have a discussion about that. And then we are preparing an inspection objection notice if you want to object based on any of that. Now, I will note this. If your inspection objection is really complicated, you may need to get an attorney to come in and draft it for you. If it's like all sorts of stuff that's beyond just a list of repairs to be made, and you kind of want to do contingencies, and it's based on this and this happening and this and that, you may need to actually have an attorney come in and draft that part, just that one form for you, and you need to pay for it. Okay? If you'd like to terminate based on inspection, we prepare a notice to terminate and the earnest money release. You say, I did the inspection, we're not moving forward. I can't deal with that stuff. So we could say, okay, we're going to prepare a notice to terminate for you and the earnest money release to see if we can get the seller to sign off on you getting all your earnest money back. Okay? If you accept the property as is, then we would prepare an inspection resolution form saying you're going to take the property as is. You're not going to make an objection based on it. Okay? So those are the things that we're doing for you during that time period. Now, what are you doing during that? During that first 10-day period or so, whatever it is in the contract, you're selecting an inspector and you're asking them to meet you to do the inspection. And you get to decide whether you're going to do just the inspection or the inspection plus some radon, plus some meth testing, plus some mold testing, lead-based paint testing, asbestos testing, termites or other pest testing. So you get to go pick all of these other additional tests. Maybe it's something else that's not on there, but you get to go look at all these different options on properties. Oh, another one that is not on here that we do when we have properties that are winterized is sometimes we will turn the water back onto the property, test the plumbing system to see if the plumbing is working, and then, of course, a lot of sellers will make you re-winterize the property at the end of your inspection period, so you have to pay to have the thing re-winterized. You can't just leave it on. Happens a lot with REO properties.
Right.
Okay? So things like that, or turn the electric on the property. Meeting inspectors or contractors at the property for the inspection. Jason, do you think I show up for most inspections?
I would imagine so.
That is not true. I don't go to any inspections.
No, really?
Nope. I don't go to any inspections at all. And the reason why is I am not qualified to look over your inspector's shoulder and tell you whether they are doing a good job or not a good job. So I have no authority, no qualifications to supervise your inspector. And so you should not rely on me to supervise your inspector because I'm not qualified to do it to begin with. And so for liability reasons, I'm not there. Okay?
Okay.
So I'm not managing your inspector. I'm not supervising them. If they do something wrong, I don't know, and I'm not able to go ahead and do that. And there's a presumption if I'm there looking over the shoulder that I'm making sure they're doing a good job for you. So you should go, but I am not going. All right. Also at your inspection, you are going to look for carbon monoxide detectors. And one of the reasons why we want to look for carbon monoxide detectors is if you have your appraiser go out there and the appraiser notes on the appraisal that they're missing carbon monoxide detectors, most lenders are going to say, we want to see the carbon monoxide detectors installed in the house. And so they're going to say, it is a condition of your loan, and you need to go and put the carbon monoxide detectors in the property, and then we're going to send the appraiser back out there for an additional fee that you're going to pay as a buyer in order to verify that they're now installed. So why not tell us when you're out there doing your inspection, did you see the carbon monoxide detectors? Have your inspector look for them, you look for them, and see if they're there. And if they're not there, we can go ahead and object to them so that they get installed. All right, Elijah says something. What if you object to an issue, the seller agrees to fix the issue, you then withdraw your objection, then the seller decides not to fix the issue after the inspection objection deadline is passed? Can you reapply an objection? All right, so let me read that a little slower. You object to an issue, the seller agrees to fix the issue. So once the seller has agreed to fix the issue, you would sign an inspection resolution form. You then withdraw your objection. You don't really withdraw it in that case. You just resolve it and say that that is the resolution for the thing. Then the seller decides not to fix the issue after the inspection objection deadline. Well, they didn't actually. They agreed to fix it. So they would sign the inspection resolution form saying they are agreeing to fix it. You put that in writing. So they basically, if they decide they're not going to do it at that point, they would be in violation of your agreement, the inspection resolution agreement. And yeah, it would be after the inspection objection deadline because most of the time we're not negotiating those until after the inspection objection period is over, but before the inspection resolution period. So can you reapply an objection? No, you would not be able to do it if it's past the inspection objection deadline. And we will talk about that when we talk about resolutions later. Is your right to reinspect and based on what the work that they're supposed to do. We'll talk about that. Okay, so looking for carbon monoxide detectors, we talked about that and why. If you're really concerned about the appliances in the property, you may want to check those and maybe write down serial numbers, take photos of them so that you get the right ones at closing. Verify info from the clue report. So one of the things we recommend you do for your inspection is call down to your insurance company and have them pull what's called a clue report. And the clue report gives you a history of all the claims on the property so that then your inspector can go look at all the claims that were made and take a closer look at them. So let's say there was a claim made to fix a leak in the kitchen. The dishwasher ended up leaking. They had to replace the floor. If you know about that from the clue report, now your inspector can go and look closer and see what the condition of the flooring was around there, or if there's any mold behind the dishwasher or anything like that. They can go look at that a lot closer than if you just didn't know that that happened and you kind of just glossed over it. So we recommend you pull a clue report before the inspection. Did you do that in yours, Jason?
I didn't before closing, no.
Okay.
I did get one after closing.
We do recommend you do that. And then verify info from the seller's property disclosure. So last week we talked a lot about the seller's property disclosure, and you should have that with you before you go and do the inspection so that you can look closer at what the seller has disclosed to you is wrong with the property or the issues with the property in the past. You also should order a sewer scope in most cases. It's more likely for older properties or ones that have kind of big vegetation like trees and stuff like that in the yard. But I think it's reasonable to do it on relatively new properties as well, because those sewer lines can be damaged and they're expensive to repair. It's a lot cheaper to pay $100 to get a test done now and then ask for a $4,000 repair than it is to pay the $4,000 repair, 60 days after you move into the property. Right. So it's probably worth doing for most times. You can order additional inspections based on preliminary findings, like if you need a structural engineer, a mold remediation expert, or whatever it is in order to get out there and estimate repairs. That's reasonable to do during your inspection period as well. And then letting us know if you want to object or if you want to terminate as soon as possible and never later than the inspection deadline. So Jason, the deadline is Friday. Inspection objection deadline is Friday. When do you think you should tell me that you say, here's the list of things I want to object to?
As soon as I can.
As soon as you can. How about Friday at 5 o'clock?
Only if I want to piss you off.
Yeah, if you want us to write up an inspection objection for you, is it best to wait until, after hours on Friday when probably we may not be there, although we probably are there, or the other agent on the other end is not there to receive the inspection objection?
Right. Yeah.
Kind of funky. So the soonest you know, we should probably submit it. Okay? There are some times when we want to kind of play these dates a little differently, but in most cases, it's as soon as possible. And then, of course, if you are going to submit an inspection objection notice, an inspection resolution notice, or a notice to terminate an earnest money release, you would sign those documents. That's one of the things you'd be doing for the inspection objection deadline. So does that kind of cover the inspection objection deadline? You understand what we're doing as the real estate agent, what you're doing as the buyer during that deadline now. Is that right, Jason?
Yep, look good.
Okay, cool. So the next deadline is your inspection resolution deadline. What we use for that is typically MEC, basically when the contract's executed, plus 13 days, which is 3 days after the inspection objection deadline. So you have 3 days once you object to resolve, at least 3 days, once you object to resolve the inspection resolution issue, to resolve the issues for the inspection, okay? So what are we doing as a real estate agent during that? We would be negotiating the inspection resolution for you. We'd be going back and forth between you and the seller and trying to figure out what would work, what wouldn't work, and what the terms are for that resolution. If you're withdrawing your inspection objection notice, if you decide, I was only joking, I really don't want you to fix the mold in the attic, I want to continue with the contract, let's withdraw that, we would prepare the inspection objection notice for you to sign and withdraw it. And there's a spot at the very bottom for you to withdraw it, and I'll show you that later. And then if you're terminating, we would prepare the notice to terminate and the earnest money release. So that's something else we would do during that. And what you're doing during this. So if you're withdrawing your inspection objection notice, you'd let us know, and then you'd sign the inspection objection notice to withdraw it. Or if you're terminating, you'd let us know, and then you'd sign the notice to terminate and the earnest money release. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So what parties are involved in this inspection process? Is it just the buyer and seller?
Oh, totally. I mean, the agents aren't involved. There's nobody else. Yeah.
So it's the buyer and their real estate agent. It's the seller and their real estate agent, but there's more. The inspector is involved because they're providing reports, and you're probably going to, in a lot of cases, include the inspection report there. The lender is involved because I'm going to talk to you in a minute. When you go and you suggest a resolution, before you suggest a resolution, before you accept a resolution, you should check with the lender to make sure that that's not going to cause a problem. Let me explain this. So let's say we've been using the example of mold in the attic. And so, you say to the seller, I object, there's mold in the attic, and I'm concerned about health and safety issues regarding the mold. And the seller says, hey, I agree. That mold's kind of funky. I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you $500 discount, or even I'm going to give you $5,000 discount on the property for you to have the mold mitigated after you buy the property. Do you think the lender is going to be okay with that?
No.
I don't think so either. And so you could say, that sounds great. I'm going to agree to accept the $5,000 discount. We're going to sign an inspection resolution saying, you're going to reduce the price by $5K. I'm going to actually have the property for $5K less, and you're going to say, I'm moving forward with the transaction. So how does the lender find out?
Well, the lender they're looped in with all the communications in my transactions so far.
Yeah, but I mean, can't like a real estate agent kind of be sneaky and not have this form kind of go to the lender? Can they just say, oh, we changed the price. Here's the contract, or we wrote up a whole new contract. Here's the price on it.
No, it's correct me if I'm wrong, but it's an amendment to the purchase contract.
It is. The inspection resolution is an amendment to the contract, and you're required to give it to your lender. And in case you're wondering if you have to give it to your lender, wait and see, because there's going to come up a form where it's going to read right on there, you have to give this to your lender. Okay, so the lender's sort of involved as a party to this kind of negotiation. Now, what about your insurance agent? Might they want to know that there's knob and tube wiring in the property?
Absolutely.
So if you say to the seller, hey, listen, I object, there's knob and tube wiring, he says, listen, I haven't had any problem with this property. I've lived here for 20 years. The knob and tube, while it's active, it's not really going to cause any problems. But I'll tell you what, as an act of good faith, I will go ahead and reduce the price by $10K, and you buy the property with knob and tube. You say, sweet, I accept. Let's reduce the price by $10K. I will just go ahead and buy it, and no one needs to be the wiser. Oh, I'm not so sure. I think you have an obligation to disclose to your insurance agent, because if the property catches on fire and there was knob and tube in it, and you did not disclose that to your insurance agent, I have a feeling your insurance agent may be trying to not pay that claim.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's a big deal. You got to tell them too. And then any contractors you bring in who could possibly do repairs and stuff like that, they may also be involved. Okay? So those are the parties involved in the transaction. All right. Here's an inspection objection notice. And I'm going to kind of read this form to you because some of you have never read one before. So this form has important legal consequences, and the parties should consult legal and tax or other counsel before signing. So in case you didn't know this, you probably should talk to your attorney before you sign these forms, or your CPA or your other tax advisor, to make sure that what you're doing doesn't have consequences to you elsewhere. Okay, so get legal advice. You have it. It's not an amendment to the contract. The inspection objection notice, where you object to say, seller, this is what's wrong with the property. That would be the resolution part. We're going to talk about that next. All right, continuing on with the inspection objection notice. This inspection objection notice relates to the contract date of the contract between seller's name and buyer's name, relating to the sale and purchase of the property known as the address of the property. Terms used herein shall have the same meaning as in the contract. Pretty straightforward. Section 1 of this, buyer's inspection objection notice. 1.1, buyer gives notice to seller that the property or inclusions, remember you can object to inclusions, are not satisfactory. They're unsatisfactory. They don't work for me. Section 1.2, description of what is unsatisfactory that buyer requires seller to correct. And then you list out what you have there. Okay? If more space is required, attached are blank additional pages. So if you're filling out a printed copy of this form, if you're back in the Stone Age and you're kind of not doing this on the computer, then you would probably need to attach additional pages and say there are 7 other pages. Here's a list of all the additional crap I want you to fix. Note, this is right on the form. Resolution of inspection items or other items agreed to by the parties may alter the terms of the contract and require disclosure by buyer to buyer's lender. Oh my gosh. They warn you on the inspection objection saying, hey, listen, you're about to object to things. The buyer may be required to actually show their lender what you're objecting to and what the problem is. The buyer is encouraged to consult buyer's lender prior to entering into a final resolution on inspection matters, as the resolution may, number one, have a detrimental impact on buyer's ability to get the loan. Lender may say no. Two, cause delays in the lender's processing and funding of the loan by closing. They may say we need to have another appraiser go out there and verify that things are done, or verify that things are as they say they are. Maybe we want to have our own independent guy go out there and check something else. And three, require further inspections and repairs. The lender may say, oh, no, we will not close the loan if you leave the mold or asbestos or whatever else is there about the property that they don't want to lend on. Okay, so communication with lenders should be in writing. So in case you wanted to do this over the phone, the Colorado Real Estate Commission says, hey, it's a good idea if when you're filling out this form, you realize that all the communication you have with your lender should be in writing, and that these could be issues with you getting a loan later. They're putting you on notice.
Oh, but James.
Yes.
There's a clause in the contract that says if I can't get financing, I can terminate.
Yeah, that's possible. It's true. I mean, if you can't get financing, you can't get financing. But might you want to know that before you pay for an appraisal?
Yes.
And might you want to talk to your lender so that maybe you can avoid having this happen and have a closing delay by another 30 days because you didn't do it right the first time? Probably. All right. So this is big boxed notes telling you should discuss it with your lender. This is not a fine print at the very bottom of the form. This is like a big bold box saying, hey, this is important stuff. Read this. Okay. It's a big deal. Now, who is responsible if the lender can no longer perform or can no longer perform on time?
That's actually what I was getting at.
Yeah.
That's
so the buyer's responsible.
Yeah, that's on me if I can't get the loan because of something I failed to loop the lender in on.
Yeah. If they miss their deadlines, that's you as the buyer. Your earnest money is at risk. You'll notice the lender didn't sign the contract. They're not a party to it. They're not obligating themselves to that deadline.
Right.
Just like the appraiser is not obligated to hit your appraisal deadline. You can't just say appraisal 5 days and say, Mr. Appraiser, look, you have to hit this deadline. It's 5 days from now. It's in the contract. The appraiser is going to say, I didn't sign that contract. I'll get it to you in 3 weeks. That's my normal turnaround time. Change your contract.
What happens?
Yeah. Change your contract. All right. All right, continuing on with the inspection objection notice. Section 1.3, inspection report is or is not attached. So often we will include a copy of the inspection report from the inspector. If we're only asking for one or two big health and safety things, it can help psychologically and from a negotiating standpoint. It can help us to show a big list of stuff the inspector found that were wrong with the property that we're not asking for. Right. So if the list of things that the inspector found was 37 items long, and you're saying, hey, listen, Mr. Seller, I will take care of 35 things, but I want you to take care of 2. We'll take care of the rest.
Yep.
Okay? But would you please do these 2 things? It's going to cost about whatever it is. Would you just take care of that? Okay. So another side note in this, by the way, only asking for big health and safety things does limit your ability to object and terminate. Remember that list we did before, sections 1 through 5, of all the different things you could object to? Well, if you modify your inspection objection clause by using in the additional provisions, we're not going to make a list of cosmetic repairs. We're only going to ask for big health and safety things. But when you get to the property, you decide, hey, listen, the property smells. Is that health and safety?
Depends on the source of the smell.
I don't think so. Not the smell. Now, it could really be a health and safety thing. If there's a rotting corpse in the basement, that's probably a health and safety, right? But if it's just the smell, maybe it's a rotting corpse next door, you can no longer object.
Right.
Right? So be super careful about that.
I actually did this when I bought this house because there was about $4,000 worth of repairs that needed to be done in order to meet the VA, NPR requirements. And I did provide the seller, the seller's agent, a copy of the inspection report because I wanted them to see all the stuff I wasn't bringing up.
Yep.
Most notably,
that's a legitimate negotiating kind of
most notably the electrical. I mean, this house legitimately needs about $6,000 worth of electrical.
Yeah.
But it wasn't an immediate safety thing. even though the inspector called it out because it's got one of those old Zinsco panels that's
Oh yeah.
yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with those. And the inspector swore up and down, you got to replace this or your house is going to burn down.
Yeah.
But it's not that big of a deal.
So the interesting thing about this, right? If you give the seller a copy of the inspection report, and now he is aware of the 35 things that are wrong with the property, if there are material facts about the condition of the property, they are supposed to disclose that to the next person who's looking to buy the property if you don't buy. Right? So you could argue this is also helping them. Now they're put on notice. They should disclose this information to the next buyer. They can't just say, oh, we're not going to tell the next buyer about the mold in the attic. We now know there's mold in the attic. We have to disclose it. So the next buyer coming in is probably going to make us an offer that wants us to fix the mold or offers a price where they have to fix the mold.
Exactly.
Okay. Some buyers are hesitant to give the seller a copy of the inspection report that the buyer paid for if the contract may terminate. Some people do that. Some people don't. I think you can give it away. All right, so inspection objection notice, continuing on. This is from the notice itself. If the buyer and seller have not agreed in writing to a settlement of the above matters on or before the inspection resolution deadline, the contract will terminate. That's my emphasis. So if you don't resolve it, you're basically saying, if we don't resolve this thing, I'm actually canceling on you. The contract's terminated. I'm going to ask for my earnest money back. Unless the seller receives written notice from buyer withdrawing this inspection objection notice on or before the expiration of the inspection resolution deadline. I've been drilling home this point for this entire class. It is critically important for you to understand how this works. If you don't take any action, if you object to something, you don't take any action by the inspection resolution deadline, if you don't come to an agreement, the contract is done. You're terminated. You can't go back after the fact and say, so let's continue. No, it's terminated. You've terminated on it. Okay? So the seller receives written notice withdrawing, and that's you filling out the bottom of the form. Then you would continue on with the contract in its as-is condition. All right, Section 2, inspection objection notice. Buyer's withdrawal of inspection objection notice. This is where you would sign if you wanted to withdraw it. Buyer withdraws the inspection objection notice and elects to proceed with the contract, and there's a spot for the buyer to sign and date withdrawing the inspection objection notice, and you sign that section only if you want to withdraw your inspection objection notice. You don't sign it if you're objecting. If you're just leaving the objection there, you do not sign that on the initial time you give it to them. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So inspection options. So we talked about this before. You can terminate based on inspection. You can object or insist. You can say, I insist you make repairs or I am terminating. You can insist on a discount or you're terminating. Hey, listen, if you don't give me $5,000 off this property, I'm terminating. You can insist on making repairs and a discount or a discount. You could say either you fix the mold, reduce the price by $5K, or I am terminating. Okay? That's the object or insist part of it. Or you can say, hey, listen, Mr. Seller, I want to buy the property, and I paid you $5,000 above asking price because I know you had 10 other offers. But, there is this health issue that's going on with the property. There's a water leak underneath the sink in the kitchen, and if you don't fix it, it's going to be leaking for the next 20 days. I'm not gonna object on it, and I'm not gonna make you fix it. But I did pay you over asking price. I'm not asking for any other repairs. Would you please fix that water thing for me? Ideally sooner than later, because the longer it waits, the more damage it's going to have, and there's going to be mold, and there's going to be all sorts of other issues. Would you please do that for me? Okay, that's an accept as is, but kind of ask sort of model. Or, hey, listen, I'm not going to go ahead and get crazy on this. We did find mold in the attic. We didn't expect to find mold. You didn't know there was mold. I didn't know there was mold. I'm not going to go ahead and object on this because I really do want to complete the sale. But I paid $10K above asking price. Would you be willing to discount $1,000 for me to offset some of the costs for fixing that mold? And they may say no, or they may say yes. Okay, and you can ask for a combination of those. And part of that is sort of like your negotiating style. Are you trying to do win-win? Are you trying to go for a win transaction where you're happy at? Or are you sort of like I'm going to make the seller pay and I'm going to win at all costs. I want to get every last penny I can out of the seller. And there are some buyers that are like that, by the way. They don't actually feel as though they got a good deal unless they came in under asking price and they beat up the seller on inspection to the point where they were almost ready to terminate. And you have to have the buyer and seller close in different rooms on closing day. Right. If they can close in the same room, Some buyers feel as though they didn't win. Some sellers feel they didn't win. Okay? So be careful about that. And then play fair and nice. Especially Nomad clients, realize that you're probably going to be buying another property, and it may be from the same agent you had on this deal.
Right.
And so realize that your reputation matters. And if you really leave a bad taste in that agent's mouth, chance you getting another offer accepted is really low. Because the other agent's going to say, hey, listen, I did a deal with this guy before. He's a slime ball. I would never do a deal with him again. So I would encourage you, Mr. Seller, not to accept this offer, even though it's above asking price. Let's wait for another guy, or only asking for trouble. Okay? So realize your reputation matters, and the reputation of your agent matters. All right, objecting tips. Check with the lender to make sure they're okay with it before suggesting the seller fix stuff or just reduce price. I've gotten burnt by this before. We came to an agreement about fixing some, in fact, it was mold in the attic. We came to an agreement over fixing mold in the attic, in this particular example. And, the buyer and seller were like, we agree that we need to fix the issue. What's better? Is it better to do a price reduction? Is it better to do the fixing of the mold? My buyer says, I don't really have a preference either way. The lender and I both thought that the lender, the mortgage broker and I both thought that the main lender person would be willing to escrow the money for the repairs. Turns out they were not okay with that. Okay, so they basically said, no, we want it fixed before it closes, or we're not closing. And so we had to resolve it ahead of time.
That was the underwriter's condition?
Yep. Yep. So realize when you're negotiating these things, make sure that you get agreement from the lender and work it out, because what you agree with the seller may not be what the lender is okay with. So it may require another trip by the appraiser to verify work was done, may cause additional underwriting delays if they see it on there and they want to get a second opinion or second set of eyes or contractor bid or whatever. Not disclosing to the lender may be considered loan fraud.
Right.
So if you think, I just won't tell them, that would be loan fraud. Don't do it. All right, be specific. So if you're objecting to something, define what you're objecting to. Reference the inspection report, the page number, and the item number when possible. Say, hey, listen, I'd like you to fix the leaking gutter, item number 4 on page 17 of the inspection report. Ideally, include photos of the item you're objecting to. If it's in the inspection report, a lot of times they'll have it in the inspection report itself with photos in it. So what's common? Object to things that are required to be fixed to get the loan, especially in a really hot market. If you're in a super strong buyer's market where sellers are bending over backwards to get deals done because there's more properties available than there are buyers, you could probably be a little bit more aggressive. However, if you're in a market like we are right now where there's multiple offers on properties and sellers are not fixing very much at all, if you can get a seller to do anything, in a lot of cases, I think that's a win. Okay? So object to things that are required to be fixed to get the loan. So if a roof is not good, you're obviously going to object to that. If the furnace isn't good because it's not working, or it's on its last leg, you may want to object to that. Non-functioning kitchen or bathroom. Some loans, other health and safety issues include stuff like peeling paint. Like if your VA loan or your FHA loan, peeling paint could be an issue with that.
Right.
Okay. So things that are required to get your loan could be things you object to. So here's a sample, and there are some challenges in this sample, and I'll kind of discuss those. So here's what we might actually write in the section for the inspection objection. There are 2 options. This is what we wrote to the seller. Seller to choose option A or B. My buyer didn't care. Option A, buyer and seller agree. Number 1, sellers to have roof replaced by a licensed contractor. 2, sellers to repair broken fence as described in item number 3 on page 10 of inspection report by a licensed contractor. Item number 3, seller to have radon mitigation installed by a licensed contractor that guarantees radon levels to be below 4.0 picocuries per liter of air. 4, seller is to submit a written plan to buyer for buyer's approval describing the exact location of the radon mitigation system prior to installation. Or remind me to tell you a story about that. And then, or option B, buyer and seller agree to reduce purchase price to $250,000 and buyer agrees to purchase property as is.
I got to ask.
Yep.
Is the 4 picocuries per liter of air, is that just your nukeness coming through? Or
No.
Is that a state law or something?
That's what it's federal, actually, I think.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, that's the federal level for radon.
Okay.
You don't test for radon in your properties up there?
It's not a issue here.
Okay.
This isn't a defined, that law only kicks in defined areas, and it does in Colorado because of your the rocks in the mountains.
Yeah, expensive soils and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, basically these are the two different options we had in a example inspection objection. So going to the inspection resolution. This form, I'm reading from it now. This form has important legal consequences. The party should consult legal and/or tax counsel before signing. So again, get legal advice if you have questions. The inspection resolution, and then it says right on the top of the form, in case you didn't know this is an amendment to the contract to buy and sell real estate. So any amendments you make to the contract, the lender needs to get a copy. So it says right on there it's an amendment. Section 1, this inspection resolution amends the contract dated November 1st, whatever the date is, between seller and buyer relating to the sale and purchase of the property known as property address. The terms used herein shall have the same meaning as in the contract. So this identifies who it's between and what contract, and it tells you that it amends the contract. Continuing on, Section 2. Resolution of unsatisfactory physical condition. Pursuant to the inspection resolution of the contract, buyer and seller agree that seller, on or before whatever date you have that they have to do all this stuff by, will do the following to resolve buyer's inspection objection notice. Then it gives a deadline for completing the work. That's that date in there. And it does not give us a deadline for inspecting or objecting to the work again. So there's no you get another week after the work is done to say, hey, listen, your contractor was an idiot. They installed this thing backwards. I need you to fix it. There's no deadline for that inspection for you to object again. So sometimes we'll add those. Most of the time we'll try to add those. And then we list out the stuff both buyer and seller are agreeing to. So for example, if you were going to accept the property in as-is condition, you went through the inspection, you're like, I don't see any problems. Let's move forward. It's good enough. So it says buyer has had property inspected and agrees to purchase property as is. This is an example of when you're agreeing to purchase property and not requiring seller to do anything. Seller's costs, Section 3. Pursuant to the damage, liens, and indemnity provision in the contract, correcting or resolving the unsatisfactory physical condition set forth in this document will be paid by seller. So the seller is responsible for fixing all the stuff or paying to have the stuff fixed. Talked about that. Seller pays for correcting unsatisfactory conditions. So what happens if the seller can't afford to pay? Hey, Jason. There's mold in the attic.
Right.
Seller says, I don't have the money.
Well, then that's on them. And
yeah, but it may be on them, but you want to buy the property. You're the buyer. Seller says to you, hey, listen, I want to do the deal with you. And I realize, yeah, there's mold in there, and the lender's not going to go for it unless the mold's fixed, but I don't have the money. I mean, I'll have the money when I close. I'll have, $10,000 or so that I can do it with, but right now I have no cash, and I don't have any credit cards.
Right. Could you work out an agreement for the buyer to pay for it and to take it down against the purchase price?
A little risky.
What's that?
I'm not sure I'd recommend my buyer pay for that.
I mean, if it was me, I'd just walk.
If you were the buyer?
Yeah.
Oh, you have little faith. All right, so here's one solution you could do.
Okay.
You could go find a contractor with the seller's permission and say, listen, I'm going to have you do the work, and you're going to put a lien on the property that'll be paid when we close.
Got it.
Basically bill me to closing date, net 30, and you'll do the work, and then you'll get paid at closing. And if you don't do it, then you'll have a lien on the property.
That's pretty smart, actually.
Yeah.
I would have thought of that.
Okay, so Section 4 of this inspection resolution, for survival. If any agreed upon correction requires action after closing, the obligations agreed upon shall survive closing. So what happens if you say, here's a list of 12 things to do, and 11 of them get done, but the 12th one, the contractor just spaces out or has to order a part or can't get it done before closing? Well, the seller, as we agree right here, still has to complete that even after closing. So whatever you agreed to in this section, it survives closing and will need to be done after closing. Okay? Now, is this practical to enforce? Like if the seller decides they're just not going to do it after closing, it's going to be hard to enforce that, right? You have to go and have legal action and make them do it.
Because it's pretty easy for them to just walk away.
Right. So I think you need to think about that and try not to get into that situation. All right. Note, this document amends the contract. Buyer must provide a copy of this inspection resolution to buyer's lender. So in case you were wondering, do I have to send this to the lender? Can I not do it? Should I do it? Guess what? The form says you must provide a copy of this inspection resolution to buyer's lender. So in case you're wondering, it's required. All right, inspection resolution form. Check with the lender to make sure they're okay with it before accepting it. So don't go sign something and then send it over to the lender, and lender say, "Why'd you do that? I can't do the loan now." So many lenders would just prefer to see a price change with no mention of repairs. Some might not. Sellers are providing a concession of X dollars, or purchase price has been reduced by X dollars. That's what some lenders would prefer to see. Best practice include the ability for you to re-inspect the objectionable items and approve the work that was done. So that's a best practice if you can do it. Require work to be done by licensed and insured contractor. Require copies of receipts. Require transferable warranty of work that was done. You want to be able to have a warranty on it. Get owner's extended coverage insurance from the title company covering mechanics liens. If the seller was going to pay a contractor to do something, and let's say they had them do the work but then didn't pay them, and then the contractor comes back after closing and says, "Hey, listen, I wasn't paid $3,000 for the repairs I had to do. Seller never paid me on that. I'm putting a lien on the property to protect myself." That's not normally covered, and that you would then, as the buyer, would then be required to pay that if you wanted to clear the lien. If you get owner's extended coverage, then that is covered. Okay. Do we need more time for appraisal to allow appraiser to go back and check work? So if you're going to go ahead and make a resolution and you know that the appraiser is going to need more time, go ahead and negotiate that as part of your inspection resolution. Do we need more time for loan objection because of additional underwriting requirements and delays? Take that into account. So these are kind of like a mini checklist of sorts for when you're filling out your inspection resolution. All right. So what's normal? I think the rest of the slides here are examples of inspection objections or resolutions. So here's a resolution sample. So prior to closing, and some of these I did not write, they were like submitted to me. I had the seller, okay? So here are some different ones I've seen. Prior to closing, the shall correct or resolve the following unsatisfactory physical condition of the property or inclusions. Number 1, seller will remove storage shelves in garage. What do you think of that, Jason?
That seems kind of weird.
Yeah, it's kind of benign. Nothing really big there. Seller will pay all costs and fees to have roof warranty transferred to the buyer. All right. Seller will credit buyer $500 for window well to be secured to foundation and east window well hole repaired. All right. Seller has enclosed documentation from city engineer and building inspector to address 2x4 truss. Seller will install missing downspouts. Seller will repair gutters over the garage so that they don't hold water over the garage. Seller will not obtain a permit for rear deck.
So they built a deck without a permit?
Yeah. But, you know, this is what their list of stuff that they're agreeing to are, right? They're saying, hey, the seller's not going to obtain a permit. It's kind of a weird thing to put in there.
Okay.
Especially as you read the default print. So this is one we received, okay?
Oh, this is one you got.
Well, we received it back. So my buyer objected, and they basically said, here's what we're suggesting the resolution would be. Okay. And they replied back with this.
I thought this was a sample that from like somewhere else.
That I wrote?
No. That somebody just submitted to you because it was weird or something.
Oh, no. These are like real life examples.
This is, so an agent sent you this.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. All right, so here's another interesting one.
Huh.
So on or before NA, not applicable. Buyer and seller agree to reduce purchase price to $205,000, and buyer agrees to purchase property as is. This is one where they just said, hey, listen, instead of negotiating inspection items, we're going to reduce the price.
Okay.
Seems reasonable.
Right.
So here's another one. Seller agrees to have radon mitigated by a licensed contractor that guarantees radon levels to be below 4.0 picocuries per liter of air. Okay. So here's the interesting one. So I had a buyer. I'm trying to remember the exact story. I had a buyer. The seller had tenants in the property. The tenants had all their boxes packed up in all the different rooms of their house. So it was really cluttered and hard to see around. We had a test of a radon. Radon came back high. We asked to have radon installed as part of our inspection resolution. And the seller agreed to have a contractor go out and install radon. They hired a company I'd never heard of before. And they went out there and they talked to the tenant. And the tenant basically said, the contractor goes out and wants to install it in one of the bedrooms. He goes there and the contractor asks the tenant who let them into the property, where do you want this installed? The tenant says, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. And so the contractor proceeds to install the radon in the middle of the bedroom between stacks of boxes that the tenant had there. Like in the middle of the room, coming in about 4 foot high on the wall and going about 3 feet out into the middle of the bedroom. So there's now this, I don't know, 4-inch PVC radon pipe coming in about 4 feet up, halfway up the wall, and going down into the, 3 feet out into the middle of a bedroom. A 10 by 12 bedroom, so a third of the way into the bedroom. Right? So we go to do our walkthrough. There was a post-closing occupancy agreement. So the tenants actually didn't move out before closing. They were going to stay there for a couple more days. So we're walking through the property, and we're looking for the radon. We're like, this is really strange. Where's the radon that was installed? Where's this thing happen? We're looking in the places you would put radon. In the closets, like behind a wall, like in the garage. Where'd they put radon? This thing. And we finally go and walk around the boxes in the bedroom and notice they stuck it in the middle of the floor. So now you'll see in all of my inspection objections that buyer needs to get to approve the location of the radon installation.
Oh my goodness!
And here's the crazy thing. So this is like we found out about this during the walkthrough because we didn't have a date in here to go look at the work before we're closing. So it was basically at the walkthrough. We're like, okay, let's go check to make sure radon was installed. If we had a problem, we'd go and talk to them, and everyone was friendly. It wasn't like a hard negotiation at all. Everyone was agreeing. So then we go to the closing, and we tell the listing agent, we got this problem with the radon. Can you get the contractor back out there? That's ridiculous. And so the radon company was arguing that the location was approved by the people that were there and that they were not responsible, did not need to go back out and fix it.
Wow.
Yep. So it got fixed. I think what happened was the listing agent told me she would pay for it if it came down to it. I'm not sure if she ended up having to pay for it or if she basically said, listen, you're welcome to leave that as is and I will pay someone to go and fix it, but you are never getting any business in the town again. We're going to go tell people that basically this is where you installed it and you thought that was okay. So good luck getting someone else, allowing someone else to install radon. I have a feeling they fixed it. Okay, so getting back to our kind of examples here.
Wow.
Seller to have active radon mitigation installed by a licensed contractor that guarantees radon levels to be below 4.0 picocuries per liter of air. Mitigation work will be completed by, and they name the company. Total cost is blank, which shall be divided evenly between buyer and seller. So in this case, the seller did not pay for the whole thing. It was to be divided evenly, and they named the amount. Buyer's share of the cost, $225, shall be paid outside of closing on the date and at the time of closing to the seller as a personal check. So basically, I think the seller was covering it, and then they wanted the buyer to write them a personal check at closing for $225, half the amount to reimburse them. Seller shall be responsible for payment of the entire bill to BYs immediately upon completion of the work. Okay, there's an example of one where that happened.
That's not out of line in my mind.
No, I think that was reasonable. Number one here in this example, seller to remove padlock from electrical disconnect pane. Someone had padlocked their electrical panel and they were going to sell their house and just leave it there with no key. It's like, we may want to be able to get into this thing. So they're going to remove it. Seller to leave behind previously installed dining area light in the house to be installed at buyer's discretion. So they wanted they'd taken down a light and they replaced it with a cheap one. Buyer walked through and saw the light on the ground, said, I want that light. So we've asked for it in the inspection. Seller to leave exterior paint in the garage. So there was some paint sitting in the garage. They wanted that. Seller shall reduce sales price to a certain price in lieu of any other inspection items. So another price reduction.
Who padlocks their electrical panel?
Well, when they're outside and anyone can walk up to them, a lot of people would or should.
Well, right.
I mean, basically, if you don't padlock it, I can walk up to your house and just shut your power off. How would you like that?
Yeah, that's a good point, I guess.
All right, continuing on. Buyer and seller agree to increase purchase price to $223. Seller will have the gas connector for the furnace repaired by a licensed contractor. Seller to provide receipts showing work was completed. Seller to have a new roof installed by a licensed contractor. Seller will provide receipts showing work was completed. Seller to provide any warranty information provided by the contractor at closing. So we raise the price, say, hey, listen, we're going to get a new roof out of this, but we do want you to repair the roof or replace the roof, but we're going to raise the price and pay for part of it. Okay? And I think in this case, if I'm not mistaken, this one might have been one where they were going to have the insurance company replace the roof because it was hail damage.
Oh.
And so we basically raised the price to pay for the insurance deductible.
The deductible, okay.
Yep. Seller will have the electrical system in the house updated by a licensed contractor, replacing the knob and tube with copper wiring so that it's up to code. Seller will provide receipts showing work was completed 1 business day prior to closing. Seller to provide any warranty information provided by contractor at closing. Seller will obtain permits for the work done on the bathroom in the front of the house. If radon test results come in above 4 picocuries per liter, seller will have licensed contractor install radon mitigation to reduce radon to below 4 picocuries per liter. Receipts will be provided at least 1 day prior to closing, and warranty information will be provided at closing. Seems like another reasonable one, right?
You know, a lot of these radon things.
You know, maybe I shouldn't say this, but in my opinion, if you're on the buy side and the radon comes in above 4 picocuries per liter, it's a health and safety issue, and it's a really easy thing to negotiate. Yeah. And it's something, especially if you're renting the property in the future, you do not want that added liability for you as the owner, as the landlord. So I think it's something you should.
I remember when I was in Colorado, it was a huge, huge, huge deal when that law passed and all these retrofits were being done. I remember, in fact, one of the professors that I was studying under in the health physics program there at CSU, he went and started a radon mitigation company in Fort Collins and gave up his tenure track professorship at CSU because it was a booming business at the time.
I think it is still booming business. I think there's some money in radon business. Yeah. Okay, here's another one. So a seller agrees to part 1 and part 2. Option A of the inspection objection dated January 14th, 2015. At closing, the seller will have land title cut a check out of the seller proceeds to BWise for their services. Buyer will be responsible for scheduling BWise and obtaining approval from the HOA for the exterior portion of the work. So what's crazy about this one is it references an inspection objection. So now the inspection objection needs to be included with the contract. So now the lender needs to see the inspection objection as well. Kind of crazy.
Interesting that the buyer is responsible for obtaining HOA approval instead of the seller.
Yeah, that is true. I don't remember this situation. This is a couple years ago, apparently. I'd have to go look at the file and see if I could trigger my memory. So, excuse me, here's another one. Seller agrees to part 1 and part 2, option A of the inspection objection dated. Oh, you know what I did for this one? So instead of just allowing them to write that, which I think is what they proposed, I rewrote it to actually reference the whole thing. So this is an example of what they sent over, and I was like, no. We're doing it right. Here's the actual objection. So here's what it says. So seller agrees to part 1 and part 2, option A of the inspection objection dated January 14, 2015, which states part 1, sellers to remove the refrigerator and couch from the garage. Part 2, option A, buyer and sellers agree. Sellers to fix the toe kick heater at the kitchen sink base. Sellers have active radon installation installed. And at closing, land title will cut a check to the seller proceeds. Buyer will be responsible for blah, blah, blah. Okay. The thing was, this one actually read, I think originally, part 1 is non-negotiable. You have to pick it. And then there was an option A and option B in part 2.
Got it.
Continuing on this. Buyer and seller agree to reduce purchase price to $262,265. And buyer agrees to purchase property as is. Seller concessions to remain the same at $5,265. So we wanted to make sure that they didn't think seller concessions were going away. Number 1, by Friday, this is actually a separate one though. Number 1, by Friday, September 5th, sellers to replace smoke detectors for units A, D, and C, and to install CO detectors for units A and C to meet current code for each unit. See items 9 and 10 on page 31 of inspection report. Seller to provide photos as proof of each one replaced installed, along with what unit it was replaced installed in and the location it was replaced installed. Appraisal cannot be ordered until these are replaced installed, as property will not pass appraisal without them installed and functioning properly. And 2, buyer and seller agree to reduce purchase price to $357,500, and buyer agrees to purchase property as is, except for 1 above regarding smoke detectors and CO detectors, which must be addressed before appraisal can be ordered. Seller concessions to remain the same at $5,000.
I like that seller concessions to remain element, because I could see how some sellers might think it's a percentage based, or maybe go away entirely or something like that.
Totally. Yep, I agree. Seller, at seller's expense, will hire a radon mitigation company, BY's Radon Mitigation, to install a radon mitigation system. System will be guaranteed to reduce radon levels to below 4.0 picocuries per liter, and retest with written results will be provided to buyer's agent. The estimate, invoice, and description of install and warranty was sent to buyer's agent 5/23/2014. Here's another one. Seller to add insulation to area missing insulation above both kitchens. Seller to have furnace and AC serviced on both units. All right, so that's an example of that. A couple more slides here. So terminating. You will want to terminate and probably ask for your earnest money back if you're going to terminate at all. If your the contract is written such that you can get earnest money back, sometimes they're not. It must do it prior to inspection objection deadline. Can't wait until the resolution deadline if you did not object. Not the inspection resolution deadline. I want to be clear about that. So you can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to terminate. I didn't object to anything. I'm going to terminate by the inspection resolution." No, it's not how it works. It has to be inspection objection. So here's an example of a notice to terminate. It allows you to check off a number of options for terminating if the way your contract was written allows for it. So it has to say you have the right to terminate, and then you check off whichever box it is. And basically it says buyer's notification of unsatisfactory condition. Buyer notifies seller that the contract is terminated because the following are unsatisfactory to buyer. For terminating based on inspection, we would normally check off property or inclusions inspection, section 10.3. And then section 25, because it references it here, explain what happens on termination. And there's a spot for signature and date of the terminating party, which in this case is going to be the buyer. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Earnest money release. It looks for agreement from the buyer and the seller on who and what amount to release earnest money. So basically, the buyer's going to terminate, and the buyer's going to say, "I deserve 100% of my earnest money back, so I'm requesting 100% of my earnest money back. Seller, please sign here." If the seller doesn't sign, there's what's called an earnest money dispute. If there's an earnest money dispute, you should seek the advice of an attorney. Okay? So the seller is saying, "I'm not giving you all your earnest money back." And so you need to go talk to an attorney about that. But if both parties agree, then the buyer signs, the seller signs, and whoever's holding the earnest money will use this form in order to release the earnest money to the party that you guys agreed to have it go to. Oh, another thing on this too. There's also a checkbox as to whether the parties mutually agree to release each other from any and all claims. So if that box isn't checked, then you could get your earnest money back, but there still could be additional claims. All right, some negotiating tips. Number one, you might want to include a pre-completed inspection resolution form with what you're asking for on the inspection objection. Here's how that would work. Jason, you go in there and you say, "Hey, listen, I would like you to fix the mold in the attic." And you send over an inspection objection. If the seller and the seller's agent say, we want to accept that, now they got to go and fill out an inspection resolution form, right, and have the seller sign it and send it back to you and say, "Okay, we accept that. We're good to go." You could, if you were the buyer, you could say, "Hey, listen, we're objecting to the mold in the attic. Seems really reasonable. That's the only thing we're objecting for. I'm going to assume the sale. I'm going to assume that you're going to agree with me on that. And so we're going to, at the same time, send over a filled out inspection resolution form saying seller agrees to mitigate the mold in the attic," and put the signature of the buyer right on there for the seller then to just sign and say, "Okay, we accept." So it's sort of like a make it easy for them to accept your proposed solution. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Some sellers' agents might find that presumptuous.
Right.
But I think in a reasonable situation, especially if you've had a little conversation, "Hey, I think the only thing that's going to come up on this one is radon. We're just going to ask for radon if you guys are okay with that. We just submit it over there," and they say, "Great, that sounds reasonable to me." And so you can submit both. Is it something the seller can make an insurance claim for example, a roof? And are you willing to pay the deductible as the buyer? If you say, "Listen, the roof, I expected the roof to be 10 or 15 years old. It was an older roof.
Right. It
looks like from the inspector says, hey, you got hail damage up here." So now you go and you say to the seller, "Hey, my inspector says we have hail damage on the roof and that they're recommending we make an insurance claim. I wasn't expecting to get a new roof, but I would be willing to pay your $2,000 deductible if you can make an insurance claim and we can get a brand new roof. Right. Would you be willing to do that?" And some sellers would be like, yes, I would be willing to make the claim. The buyer will pay $2,000 to cover the deductible, or whatever the amount is, to cover the deductible. And now the buyer gets the property with a brand new roof for $2,000.
But some sellers won't want to do that because they don't want that claim on their record.
Sure, I think that's valid. I think some sellers would not do that. Okay. And then another negotiating tip, which I like to use a lot, is option A and B. And option A is a price reduction, or option B is a list of repairs. And then you prepare either your amend extend or your inspection resolution for one or more of the options. So you say option A is going to be we'll reduce the price, or option B, I'll do these repairs. And from the buyer's perspective, you can weight the amount of the price reduction larger or smaller to make it more or less attractive than the repairs. So for example, let's say you really, really, really want them to mitigate the mold. You don't want to do that yourself. So what you might do is you might do the discounts off the price be really high,
right?
So that they're more likely to say, we'll just do the mold. The mold's only going to cost us $5,000. Okay. And then, or the price reduction is $10K. But you really wanted them to do the mold mitigation because it saves you a lot of hassle. You don't have any unexpected things come up or anything like that. So you could say, I really want you to do the repairs. Or you could say, you know, this list of repairs, I'll do them myself. And so my cost of doing them is really low. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and encourage them to pick the let me do the repairs, or take the price reduction, and I'll get a little bit of money and I'll actually do the repairs myself. I'd rather they not do the repairs. And so you weight the amounts. They don't always have to be equal. You can make the price reduction larger or smaller to make it more or less attractive compared to doing the work. And the buyer decides that.
Now, since your market right now is hotter than the surface of Alpha Centauri, what are you seeing most commonly? I'm assuming it's the price reduction, but not very much.
Oh, I think we're not seeing a lot of repairs, and the health and safety stuff that we are seeing, you could still give them choices. You could say either price reduction, or I need you to mitigate the mold, or install radon, or there's another issue going on with something that we didn't know about. There's stuff that comes up. So a lot of times though, we're saying we're not asking for a lot of repairs in order to get our offer accepted, because there's 10 offers on the property. Yeah. And that, my friends, is the end. Wow. Any questions? Jason, do you have any questions about this?
No, sir.
Was that super helpful? Kind of seeing the inside scoop of lots of different examples of how inspections work and the process and what you need to be careful of and how they're written and examples of how they're written and how they're negotiated. That kind of help you understand that?
In particular, I like the inspection objection examples. It would be, you could do an entire 2-hour class just doing nothing but showing 200 of those.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the examples are great. And Laura just said, very informative, thank you. Wish I could get CE credit for this one. Yeah, I mean, because what's cool about it is, especially if you're an agent, you get to see what the examples are of the actual things that other people are writing, right? Because if you're on the listing agent side, you see how other people write a lot of these. But if you're on the buy side, you don't always see examples of them, and you kind of want to see. Yeah, Laura says new agents should definitely see this. I agree. I think that there's a lot of really good stuff for agents to see. And then as a buyer, you're doing one transaction a year as a Nomad, maybe a couple if you're doing Nomad and buying additional properties, but you don't have a lot of exposure to this. You don't know what's normal in inspection objection. So I pulled real examples from real deals, and I showed you what the range of negotiation has been for some of these things.
I'm curious, on the buy side, what is the absolute craziest thing you've ever had to object to?
Oh, I had one client once make me one of the gnarliest lists ever. Let me see if I can find it. I probably won't show it because it's got their contact information on there, but I'll see if I can at least look it up and read you some of the items. What was their name? Oh, here it is. Objection. All right, let's see here. So it had A, B, C, D, E, F, G of stuff.
What?
Yeah, it had a bunch of things on there. And actually, I've heard rumors about much gnarlier ones in very strong buyers markets where they can ask for a ton of little nitpicky stuff. But this was in our current market. This was late last year, like October.
Did the deal go through?
They did. The sellers actually agreed to it.
What were some of the things on there?
Gutters repaired, missing downspout replaced, fixing galvanized flashing, structural engineer evaluate things and give a certification, window wells stuff, roof structure stuff, some deck issues. So it was a pretty gnarly list.
Huh.
Yeah. So that's probably the gnarliest one recently.
Okay.
I remember seeing it and I called them up. I said, hey, I just want to let you know before we start going over this line by line, this is the longest list of things I've seen in a very long time.
You said that to your buyer?
I said it to my buyer. I have a good relationship with my buyer.
Okay.
So I told him, I said, yeah, this is the most gnarliest list I've seen in a long time. You should be aware of that. So.
Huh. But the transaction closed.
They accepted the inspection. It did not close though.
Oh.
They did all the repairs. It ended up not closing based on loan.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
That's not exactly true. They did do all the inspection stuff though. It got past inspection.
So what's the craziest thing you've ever seen on the listing side? Although that one you showed.
I will tell you what the craziest thing. I'll tell you the craziest thing. That was not the craziest thing I've seen on the buy side. I had a offer. Buyers asked for much longer list than that. I should have used that as an example. A much longer list of stuff on the buy side, and the seller said we're not doing anything.
Wow.
Like huge laundry list of stuff like leaks, active leaks, like major stuff, and the seller's like, we have a backup offer in place that has waived inspection. We are not doing any repairs.
Oh. Did they buy the house?
Yes. They're about to close.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Seller said no. Like completely, just outright, no. Nothing. Not even a counter. Just nope.
No.
If you want to withdraw, that's fine. We got a really strong backup.
Okay.
So. All right, folks. Thank you all for coming. Elijah says the examples are great to see what other people are looking at. I totally agree. This is what's so great about this. And the problem is the titles, the topics and stuff like that. You're welcome, Laura. The topics and stuff like this are ones that you're welcome, Elijah. They're like, they don't get people excited, but when they come on, they're like, this is great stuff. This would be really helpful if you're going to go buy a house and everything. So, maybe we need to do a better job of marketing the class topics and stuff. I've got some ideas on that, which you and I should discuss after my little weekend getaway to think about Nomad stuff.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for coming on. Jason, are you calling me after, or what's the deal? Or are we talking tonight or not?
Oh, are we?
It's up to you.
I'm good.
All right, cool. We will chat via email. Thanks to everybody who came, and thanks to people watching the recording. I will see you all next week. Bye for now.